Hello everyone! In this video, I'll show you how I draw my fantasy maps. It's a very simple method and requires very little drawing skills, so anyone can do this. I start off by throwing some dried rice on my sketchbook. This isn't required, but it makes for easy, interesting, random shapes. Then I draw some squiggly lines around the rice to make the shapes of the continents and islands. Of course you don't need the rice for this, you can also just freehand it. Just remember that landmasses don't have regular geometric shapes. The next step is the mountain ranges. You could draw individual mountains next to each other and build them up like that, but I prefer to draw the mountain range as a whole. I do this by drawing squiggly irregular lines again, and then drawing the slopes from the extremities to the left and right. When I do this in pen, I also add shadows, but here I'll do that later when I ink everything. For the locations of these mountain ranges, I look where it is plausible that the geological plates have crashed into each other to form mountain ranges. Next step is the rivers. Rivers will always flow the path of least resistance, so from high to low. This means they start in the mountains and go towards the shore. Also, they never split, they do meet up though. So they can have different starting points and meet up somewhere in the middle, but they don't have the same starting point and then have different endpoints. Lakes form when there's a low point in the land. So this low point first needs to fill up before the river flows on. This mainly happens in valleys. Of course, nature is much more complicated than that, but these are just some simple rules to help you start drawing fantasy maps. The next thing I do is draw in the forests. Of course, again, you can draw individual trees, but that takes a long time. So I prefer just drawing a mass of greenery and then putting some tree stems underneath it to create an illusion of a dense forest. Trees need water to live, so I mainly place my forests around my rivers. Then there's also a thing called rain shadows. This occurs on either the east or west side of your mountain ranges. This means that the mountains are so tall that the clouds can't go over it, so all the rain falls on one side of the mountain. There will be a lot of forestation, and the other side will be more barren. If you want to know more about this, I highly recommend the videos from Artifaction, where he explains more on designing climates. From there on, I just embellish everything where I can. I add some nice runestones in some places, indicate where grassland is by just putting some little stripes down, and add the towns. I also add a smoking volcano on the little islands in the middle. Here I draw some clusters of houses to indicate the villages and towns, but normally I only just do a dot. You really don't have to do this. I mainly put my villages around riverbanks, since that's where most real-life big cities are. I started to learn how to do this so I could draw the maps for my Dungeons and Dragons games, but then I found out that it's super easy, and now I doodle it all over everything, especially my lecture notes from uni. With this you hardly have to think about what you're drawing, but it always looks really impressive. And that's exactly why I decided to do this on the first page of my new sketchbook. It's perfect to overcome first page anxiety. Also, it really looks like one of those fantasy books that has their world map on the first page. And of course, no fantasy map is finished without a fancy compass. To match the aesthetics of the front of my sketchbook, I made it in an Art Nouveau style. However, this wasn't as easy as I thought, because I couldn't find much reference material for Art Nouveau compass. So it's kind of a leafy, swirly mess, but it looks okay. At the beginning, I marked a border around my map because I wanted to do an Art Nouveau style border around the map in its entirety. Again, to tie it in with the aesthetics of the front. Sadly, this wasn't the most fun or interesting part, so I'll speed right through it. Now that that's done, it's finally time to ink it, and really bring it to life. For inking, I used my Sakura Pigma Microns. For the rivers, I used the 01 and double lined them to indicate the river banks instead of just the river, so that if I later decide to paint it, I can still paint the rivers blue. For the landmasses, I first outline everything with a 05, and then again with a 08, but only on the southwest side, so you get this 3D effect. For the towns, I only use the 08 because they are imported and the first thing you want to look at when you look at a map. The mountains are done with a 03 and the shadows are added with a 05. Now, because I'm using my fancy fine liners doesn't mean you have to. You can just use a normal ballpoint pen. I actually really like to work with those because you can alter the thickness of the line by altering the pressure you put on the pen. So you can achieve with one pen what I'm now using 5 fine liners for. For the forests, I do the same thing as for the land masses, but in a smaller size. So I first outline with a 03 and then do the southwest with a 05. Now the inside little bubbles are done with a 01 as well as the stems from the trees. I also add some shadows underground next to the forest by hatching with a 005, so that's a really small one. You can't really see that on camera, but in real life that just adds that little bit more. I just keep repeating this for all my landmarks, landmasses, everything. Now you can also add some extra little details. My favorite is always to put a sea monster somewhere in the ocean. Here I skipped that, maybe I'll do that later on. Some other things I like to add in are little boats or dragon shadows, and sometimes even very tiny sheep. I outline my border design with a brush pen to make it stand out from the rest of the map, really separate it. Now of course you don't need to do a border at all, it's just more work, but for this one I wanted to do that just to have it more cohesive with the rest of my sketchbook, make it more me. However, I did skip out on the flowers. I decided I didn't like them enough. If you're just doodling or just trying out drawing a map, then you can just skip this. You really don't need to bother. To separate the landmasses some more from the ocean, I go in with my 005, so that's again that really small one, and outline around the coastlines with some gaps in between. And then do it again, but with some more gaps. And to finish it off, I put a dotted line in my cardinal directions, but only in the ocean, and outline my compass with the 08. And finally I erase all my pencil lines and add in the letters fall east, west, and south. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like, subscribe, and share with another friend. See you next time. Bye!